Hey, folks, we're back for our wrap-up episode talking about season 5 as a whole instead of individual episodes. Also allows us to circle back and answer a lot of the great questions you guys had for us that we just didn't have time for. It's kind of funny how our episodes have felt rushed. Well, so have the Game of Thrones episodes. That's one theme I would point to, especially as a book reader. I think even people who have read the show, even people who have watched the show and haven't read the books, might agree that some of the things have seemed rushed, even though they have nothing to compare them to. So we'll be talking about things like that and lots of other fun topics. So much to talk about and things to predict and get ahead. So real quick, I want to explain again how the live Q&A works. Basically, you can ask questions through the Q&A button that should be in the upper right of your screen either through the viewer or on the event page itself. You can upvote other people's questions, and the highest voted questions are ones that are almost certain to get answered, and some of the ones that don't get a lot of upvotes still get a pretty good chance to get answered as well. We're going to really focus on questions today. We're going to spend most of the time answering questions, but Sean's got some things he wants to talk about, and I've got some questions for Sean. And we've got a few announcements and pieces of news, so we'll get through that and have as much fun as we can possibly have in these 2 hours. So real quick, let me handle some business. This episode is going to be a bit less analytical and a little bit more about geeking out and talk about what we liked and didn't like. But of course, good questions are good questions, and a lot of these are real. I've read a lot of the questions in advance. I know a lot of you guys will be posting more questions as this episode runs, but we are what we are, and we're analytical people. So even when we try to sit back and have a little more fun and geek out, we're still going to be very analytical along the way.
I'm going to talk about how I like to analyze what I like.
So I'm going to start with the most important question that we'll tackle today, which is usually the most important question. We've been asking it a lot lately. Sean, what are you drinking today?
This is, once again, Mountain Dew mixed with fruit punch. I have found Mountain Dew is very mixable with lots of it. You can't mix Coke with orange juice. You can mix Mountain Dew with orange juice. It just becomes sweet carbonated orange juice. It's good stuff.
All right.
This is fruit punch mixed with the red Mountain Dew.
I imagine that a good third of listeners right now are rushing to make this exact same beverage if they have the ingredients. Yeah.
Well, I've told you the ingredients, but not the proper ratio, so don't even try to copy me.
Yeah, you might cause explosions or...
Your beer might grow out all of a sudden.
That's the secret to growing along.
Careful, ladies.
Yes, very careful. Be very careful. Okay, so a few more bits of news before we dive into the questions. We're going to do a book to show episode this week as well. We're lining up some special guests. I won't announce who they are yet because not everyone is confirmed, but we should have a lot of people, and we're going to do what's basically an awards show. I have prepared a lot of best of, worst of, favorite, least favorite type questions. Some of them are pretty straightforward, but some of them are a little sneaky and subtle. We'll also discuss our answers, so that'll be a lot of fun. And this is effectively our last Game of Thrones Q&A for the season. Since we're not going to do a Q&A for the book to show episode because we have so many guests, we're not going to have time to handle questions. I've brought up my own questions, and of course we are going to be doing Q&A regularly starting sometime in the future, but that will be book centric until season 6 comes along, and then we'll be back to doing Q&A for show topics. For more information on the book topic Q&A information, check out Patreon, www.patreon.com/History of Westeros. We've got some more info up there, and we'll also be playing Game of Thrones Risk sometime soon. We're going to get an advanced copy of that from our friend and listener, Andrew Wolf. We haven't gotten the copy yet, but we're going to be doing some things with some fun things with regard to that. So check us out on social media for updates on that. At Westeros History on Twitter, History of Westeros on Facebook, and we're also on SoundCloud as History of Westeros. And of course, if you're already watching us on YouTube, you've got us here already.
I don't want to catch you too off guard with this, Aziz, but if I dive into book 2, I don't know if we'd do some kind of book review or Q&A.
Sure, we could do that. That would be book-centric. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
So folks, if you want to, that's actually a great place for us to start. Let's start with this question. from James Buchel. And so now that the show and books are close to the same place, will Sean be reading all of the books now? Because from this point, for the most part, we are all unsullied, unless George gets the Winds of Winter out before season 6, of course. Well, before letting you answer that question, Sean, I will respond to the possibility of the Winds of Winter being out before next season. I personally think it's less than 50-50 that it will be out. I'm usually pretty optimistic, so take that with a grain of salt. Basically, just this last weekend, George said that he had needed to write about 480, 450, maybe 500 more manuscript pages to have a completed book. Well, he has to do that within about 6 to 7 months because there needs to be about 3 months for the book to actually hit shelves. So, almost 500 manuscript pages in 6 months. I don't know if that's not very likely. He could do it. He could do it, but I wouldn't get my hopes up, folks. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I could be wrong, and I would love it if I was wrong, but I'm probably not wrong. So, Sean, what do you think? How about reading the books? What's your plan? Do you think you're going to read as many of them as possible? Maybe just 1 or 2, kind of do it slowly?
I know the kind of patterns and schedules of my life, and about a book a year is about what I get. And this is a long book too, right? So I expect to read book 2, and I hope to get it done before the next season starts. But I'm not going to have it like next month or something. Maybe if I really shift my schedule around and commit myself to it, I might get it done early, maybe even start book 3. But I don't want anyone out there to expect me to suddenly read all the books before the next season. I just know that's not the schedule of my life.
Okay, so let us keep moving here. That was a good question. We're not going to pick a whole lot we're not going to go location to location like we do other episodes. We're just going to jump around and pick the questions that have the most votes and just go where the questions take us. So no needing to categorize things by location. So Sean, you can jump in anytime with your own thoughts, especially if they relate to a question. But for now, let's go ahead and take another question from Helene May. If John, quote, comes back from being dead, is he released from his vows to the Night's Watch? Do you think that the Night's Watch would even accept a reanimated John? That's a very good question. It's kind of a technical question, isn't it? Like, well, I don't know. Does it release him from his vows?
A couple thoughts on that. One is I feel like the sort of a technical aspect, you might even know. I don't have the words of the vow memorized, but I have it in my mind that it possibly or probably would. Is it cool?
Yeah.
Is it what was I going to say? The details of the vow, I can imagine it says, like a wedding or whatever, said, till death do us part. Well, if he got killed and came back, well, that did his part. So now I don't have to, I don't know if the vow works like that. But let's say that it does. There's still sort of like, and if then next, in general, maybe the wall would accept someone back if they died and were resurrected. But would they accept John specifically back? You know what I mean?
They kind of made their thoughts known about him.
Yeah. Although, again, they may rethink it if he came back from the dead. I don't know if that would make them maybe see some power in John or some rightness in him that they didn't see. Or maybe they'd be extra. They might think he's a zombie. It might be extra against him. I can imagine that going either way. But another question to ask is, would he want to go back to the wall? Or the watch. In general, would he want to, would he see this as an opportunity to do something else with his new life? Or even if he had still felt obliged to honor his vows, even after dying, coming back. Screw those guys. They killed the mutineers. Maybe he feel obliged to kill them all.
My first act as reinstated Lord Commander is to hang all the people that stabbed me.
Yeah. Starting with Ollie. Stan is burning a little girl. John was hanging a little boy.
Well, it's good that we can have a sense of humor about these things, which is a good segue to this next question. I'm curious how Sean finds the tone of the series after the season. Show has been pretty brutal with some fan favorite characters without any of the foreshadowing the books have. Does it feel really depressing, or is he excited to see how it ends?
I did have the thought that this season was sort of like the Empire Strikes Back of Game of Thrones. Like at the end, you're like, Luke's hand is chopped off and Han's gone, and it seems like everyone is kind of like, even characters, even sort of villainous characters like Cersei, were still at the point like, geez, you have to do all that, like. That said, I do know that a lot of people have different tastes, different personalities, maybe even different defense mechanisms. Because I have a few friends that watch this show and are humorously entertained by Ramsay. They think of him, they think of him as like almost a cartoon character. It's so funny how over the top evil he is that they find humor in it, and even in Roose, and that they are almost like laughing at what he's doing to Sansa. Just to them, it's like funny. They're imagining the writers trying to decide, ooh, what's the evilest thing we can do? I suppose rather than trying to be serious or trying to be artistic, they think of it as trying to be over the top, which I could see that. I could see how a person might find that entertaining or funny. Some people have morbid senses of humor, or maybe it's a defense mechanism against what would be more disturbing. You find a way to laugh at it. Generally speaking, though, I take it pretty serious and feel like it's pretty dark. There's several times I'm sitting there like, man, this is awful. A lot to the point a lot of times when I also am trying to separate whether I feel it's awful what the character is doing, or awful what kind of person would write this, or it's awful what this means for the direction of the show. I definitely am sort of like disturbed and disappointed by how things have gone with Stannis. Obviously, I still like the show. There are certain things that they've done poorly, and I think it's fair to say the show's gone downhill since the first season. But going from a 10 to a 7 doesn't make the show bad. Doesn't make me not stop watching it. Assuming it was 10 in the first place or 7 now, it's really hard to rate a show, something like this, that has so many different plot lines and characters and themes and facets. There could be a certain element that's just awful or you don't care anything about, but there's other, there's one really bad thing happening and 10 really awesome things that are happening. How bad does that one thing have to be to make the other 10 not worth it? Say one really bad thing is happening and only 4 other good things are happening. I don't know how to rate it quite, but at this point, I'm obviously engrossed in it, invested in it, loving the show, happy that it's seeing success, getting me to read the books, trying to tell my friends. I might even start doing a podcast on it. Oh, wait.
So I need to correct something I said earlier. I said that we would be playing around with Game of Thrones Risk. Well, that's a little later. I should have said Game of Thrones Monopoly. That's the one that we're going to be getting soon. Game of Thrones Risk is another month away. So we'll actually be showing them both. But Game of Thrones Monopoly is first. So anyway, small correction there. So as far as myself answering this question about the depression level of the show, I think that I don't know that it's darker than the books, although it is more about there's more shocking things in the show, things that kind of come more out of nowhere. I think that there is more setup for some of the similar events in the books, and that plays a huge role in determining how you judge it and the feel for it. But on the other hand, one thing about the show that makes it seem gloomier to me is the acting performances. George is a great writer, but there's something to be said for looking at people's faces and how humans are social creatures. And if you see the reaction on someone's face and how they're behaving in their facial, movements, that really touches deep into a human subconscious. There's nothing, that's a really, really hard thing to not react to. It's something that's really hardwired into us. Even monkeys in captivity have learned to react to the video screen of another monkey and its facial reactions. Just like they understand what distress looks like. It's a universal emotion. Like the word for sorry is expressed very differently in a lot of languages, and I suppose there isn't a sorry in Dothraki, but facial expressions do not change from culture to culture. The disgust is the look of disgust is the same from culture to culture throughout every culture in the world. the look of happiness and joy. Those things are the same. And so I think it's something we all can key into when when Sansa or Theon, well, Sophie Turner or Alfie Allen, has a really terrified look on their face. It's hard for us not to feel a little terrified ourselves too, even if we know deep down and consciously that what we're watching is actors. So that's pretty interesting. And the same thing when you're reading a book, it's a book, but if it's a well-written book, it's immersive and you feel like it's kind of real. And that's a good job when they make you feel like it's kind of real, when you feel tied into the characters, when you're concerned with their fates, and when things that happen to them feel real to you. That means the author's doing a good job, or the showrunners are doing a good job, or it means you have a really creative imagination, or both. So I think it's pretty interesting how the tone has definitely shifted. It does seem kind of dark. It's definitely the darkest note a season has ended on, I think, having Jon leaving it like that. I think more of the other endings of the season were more uplifting, I think, if I'm remembering correctly anyway.
Even ones that were dark, it might have been a dark moment, but it was either not quite as tragic or it was dark for someone else. Like Tyrion killing Tywin. I feel that was, a central character who's been around for a while, being killed by his own son, Shay. It wasn't bright, but it wasn't Tyrion dying. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was characters who on some level themselves were villainous. Even if maybe you appreciate their characters in a show, they at least on some level were villainous and dying. And it's meant trouble for a more protagonistic character, but they weren't dead. There was some plan, some triumph for them or whatever. Whereas this was definitely, and it started a couple episodes back. It was like, loss and devastation and challenge not being met, one after another for a couple or 3 episodes. Well, more than a couple or 3 episodes. Go back to Barristan being killed and so on.
Yeah, there was a lot of major deaths this season, and it was, I think we're going to see more of that as the show, winds itself down towards the conclusion 2 seasons from now. I think we'll have a lot more moments like that where there's a lot of tragic deaths, and there may be more major outcries depending on who some of these deaths are. I did some research on IMDb for fun and for this episode to get an idea of the ratings for this season as well as last season. Now, a caveat for these numbers: typically hype and excitement drives ratings up initially, and then they kind of level off a little bit. So some of these things might drop, but the early season ratings for the episodes 1 through 5 had, I think, the highest average for the first 5 episodes that I've seen. Certainly the highest rated season appears to be season 4. So this season lagged behind a little bit in terms of ratings, which of course doesn't necessarily correlate to how the fans in general felt about it, as well as critics. But the highest rated episode of the season was episode 8, Hard Home, with a 9.9 on IMDb, which is huge. And it doesn't show any sign of dropping, which puts it at the highest rated Game of Thrones episode of all time, behind or ahead of Reigns of Castamere and The Lion and the Rose, which is the Red Wedding and the Purple Wedding. So, which are their nicknames, of course. Season 4 had almost half of all the 9.0 or higher rated episodes were in season 4.
Which season?
Season 4.
That's my favorite season, by the way.
Okay.
Well, season 1 I think is my favorite. It's hard to say, and it's a little unfair too, because as seasons progress, you have the building of characters from prior seasons to go with. But
that's true.
I assume I'm going to go ahead and talk about it because I feel like this is the thing we should cover in a recap. I think that my favorite seasons go season 1, and I think that's just because it got me into it, established the characters in a world, and it also kind of like made me realize, when Ned Stark, I could say this isn't spoiler, right? Everyone at this point should have seen season 1. Ned Stark got killed. That was like I was like, whoa, this is serious. This is not just like, this is not another typical show. This is not just for, I don't want to say just for entertainment, like that's necessarily bad, but what I mean is this is a deeper level of entertainment, that you would spend a whole season developing a central protagonistic character and kill them off. I don't want to say unceremoniously, but I can't think of quite the right word, but he was killed off randomly by a boy. At least
it was not a heroic death.
Right.
Yeah.
If it had been in battle, or even if like Littlefinger had poisoned him, that might not have been honorable, but at least Littlefinger's like this master conniver, and he found a way to get in that start. But there's just some punk kid on a whim, you know, like you just
we're gonna execute him.
Yeah.
All set to trade him for hostages and do the right thing, and nope, kill him.
So it was like moving. I think that a lot about film in general, and it's weird. I have a hard time expressing this because it makes it seem like I want people to die or I like dark things, and I don't. Maybe that is true. I don't know, but I don't think that's true per se. What is true though is that when a show or a book or a movie or whatever kills a main character, someone you think of as a good guy, it makes you actually be afraid for the other characters. You take it more seriously. Most movies, there's no chance when you're watching Spider-Man and in 30 minutes in he's fighting some bank robber or whatever, this Spider-Man is going to get killed and die. You're not really worried for Spider-Man.
That's true.
And I thought it was a big move. And was it Dark Knight Returns, whatever one with Heath Ledger played the Joker, you know, and maybe I shouldn't spoil Batman. I assume everyone's seen that also. But typically the superhero, because you know they're not going to die, what the writers do is they make them choose between, you know, Superman has to choose Lois Lane or the people of Chicago or something like that, you know, and you just can't do both. And so Superman flies around Earth and makes time go back, you know, like as much as I love that movie, it was such a lame way to handle it. Spider-Man gets to save, what's her name, Mary Jane, and the trolley or whatever. They just do both, you know, but Batman couldn't do both. And you're like, whoa, this is serious. This is real. I'm actually worried now, you know, the Joker becomes a real villain. So I kind of felt like that at that, not that the show wasn't already good and other characters had also died, but when Ned Stark got killed, that was a wake-up call to how serious and how good the show was. And it also made me start thinking, I've said this before, kind of like almost seemed inevitable. Once it happened and you think back, you almost feel like you could have seen that coming. You know what I mean? Did you think that Ned from the North with all his honor was going to go down in this beehive of corruption and politicking and just everything would be okay? You know, like Cersei warned him, you played the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. Like, I feel like all the illusion and hints and foreshadowing and even just the sense of it, if you think of it like a chess game, all these pieces move a certain way. Ned acts like this, Cersei acts like this. You look at a chessboard, if you're good enough, your mind can kind of predict forward a few turns, you kind of see what's going to happen. And I started to look at the show that way. This is a big tangent here. Point is, I like season one best. I like season one best. Season two, we restart with a lot of new characters. And in fact, I do like characters being built up, but there's characters we've already gotten attached to that I want to see where they're going with that. And we got a little less of that for the second new characters. By season three, we're more attached to these new characters, and I appreciate that. But now we have like all this torture stuff going on with Theon. And I just didn't really appreciate that. And I can imagine, I feel like I was particularly studying the show. I was trying to figure things out, understand stuff. I was really becoming a fan of it and watching episodes. Days before I was even doing the podcast, I was taking notes on stuff, you know, and I kind of pieced together what was happening, that was Roos's son torturing Theon. I was able to kind of figure out that's what was happening there. But I feel like the average viewer must have just been totally bewildered, totally in the dark about why are we just watching these gruesome torture scenes? What is happening? And it went on and on, like every episode, 5 or 10 minutes for this whole season.
Yeah.
And even me kind of like intrigued by it and maybe even a little point of pride. Ooh, I figured out what this is. I still didn't want to see it, you know. It was a big down, you know, it knocks the level season 3 down a notch for me.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, season 3 appears to be possibly the lowest rated season. I didn't do averaging for them, but it had some lower rated episodes. In fact, there were 5 episodes in the history of Game of Thrones out of 50 episodes. There's only been, like I said, there's 12 episodes that rated 9.0 or higher. There's only 5 that rated below 8.0. 3 of them were in season 3.
Yeah.
So that certainly is an impact. And another fun stat there. Of all those 12 9.0 or higher episodes, 7 of them are episodes 8, 9, or 10.
Yeah, yeah.
And all episode 9s, all 5 episode 9s are 9.0 or higher. Yeah.
That kind of feeds into the other point I was going to make about season 4. Why I think season 4 is my favorite is because now you have all these different characters that have come up through multiple seasons. They're all kind of in play in season 4, and then we have several big moments.
Plus a couple of new characters like Oberyn Martell, who was a huge hit right away.
Yeah, it's good new characters still being introduced, being mixed in with characters that we've had developed for a long time.
Yeah.
And then big moments happening with them, then being killed off and reminding you, hey, this is serious. Hey, don't get too attached to someone. It make you care more about it, more worried, more emotional. Without what for me of a taint on it like season 3 had. And I'm going to say season 5 also had a taint because there's lots of great stuff about season 5, but I just feel like Dorne is the taint of season 5. I feel like it's the most disappointing aspect, and
seems widely agreed.
And I imagine a lot of times things that people like or don't like are going to be connected to their expectations from the books, which I don't happen to have. And I still was disappointed by Dorne. I still felt like it was missing, hollow, empty, superficial, panned over. I could attach all kinds of negative attributes to it. And sometimes bad stuff that happens, I find ways in my mind to justify it, especially action. I don't really care about the action in the first place. All the shows and movies always do bad action, so this isn't really special that they're doing a poor job with it. I could see how the action could have played out a little bit differently. I feel like the action with Dany was sometimes kind of weak, but I can still see within this action scene what needed to happen. I can reimagine it in a different way so that the plot points still get hit, the characters still develop properly. That said, though, sometimes it bothers me extra when I, just this guy at home watching a show, maybe I'm just being arrogant, but I feel like I could have done a better job. They have who knows how many $1 million of a budget, how many script doctors and writers and editors and directors and creative minds, actors themselves, so many people that should be getting this right. And when I feel like I can sit at home and be like, why didn't they just have, Ilaria meet with each sand snake differently for us to learn about their opinions and get their characters and their names down rather than lump them all together superficially? And then people tell me, yeah, it's kind of how it was in a book. I'm like, dude, why did they put I was already kind of frustrated that I can so imagine how frustrated people who had certain expectations from the books are feeling about it. And so kind of like the torture scenes with Theon, I think this season has that taint to it. But it doesn't mean that it was a bad season or I didn't like it. It just had a negative part. I like to make analogies. I've made this one before. If every day someone came up to you and gave you $20, like, hey, Sean, I gave you $20, and just gave me $20 every day. And then one day they only gave me $10. Like, what the hell? If they took $5 from me one day, I'm like, well, you've been giving me $10 every day. It's okay. I'll let you go on this one. I'm not going to stop being your friend or whatever.
So a couple other IMDb stats for fun. The lowest rated episode this season, good time to point this out, is also tied for the lowest rated episode of all time, tied with season 2, episode 2, entitled The Nightlands. Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken was the lowest rated episode of the season at 7.8, tied it, which is a tie with The Nightlands for the lowest rated episode of the 50 so far. So that certainly tells you something. The dislike of Dorne and the Dornish plot lines was very widespread. Pretty much any time I read any commentary anywhere on the show, that was top of people's bottom or bottom of people's top. Thing they liked least or the thing they most wanted to complain about. And I don't disagree.
I wonder if the showrunners, the writers and directors, I wonder if they just kind of keep themselves removed from social media, or if they're digging in it. Please give us feedback. I imagine that once at the point we're doing reviews, it's already filmed. They can't redo the Dorne stuff.
Yeah, what are they gonna do? Yeah.
But I still wonder if they're like, all right, we messed up with Dorne. Let's move on. I wonder if they up late at night feeling bad about it.
Okay, so let's take another question. We have from Andrew Wolf. What role do you expect Bran and Mira and Hodor to play in the upcoming season? Also, Hodor. Well, good question. Of course, we know that they weren't in the season at all, and that involves, that means there's something's got to be happening. We expect Bran to be learning some mysteries, but Mira and Hodor, it's a tougher question. What do you think about? I guess Hodor is just going to stick around with Bran and continue carrying him around, I suppose. Mira perhaps is a bit more of a quandary. She's just in the cave with Bran while he learns these secrets and stuff. It's kind of hard to see what she's doing right now.
I will say that I have thought from like a filmmaking perspective of how they're going to manage Bran and Hodor. I feel like he's just going to be too big. Even Hodor's a big guy, but it's still Bran's. I feel like it's getting really awkward to have Hodor carrying Bran around.
He's hit that growth spurt. Yeah.
To the point I've wondered if they could or should recast him. I don't know. I don't know about that, but I would be okay with it. I don't know what the showrunners feel, what kind of contracts they have with the actor, what our audience out there feels. But me personally, I almost wonder if that's why they just left him out for a season so they could reintroduce another actor and it wouldn't be as sudden a shocking change.
I've heard nothing about recasting him, but it is possible. But I do not think it's going to happen. I
suppose, like, if I remove myself from thinking about how things are going to come across in film, what should happen with the story, I can imagine Hodor just keeps carrying Bran around. But I can also imagine Bran just gets grown up into that tree and tangled up in vines and just his mind travels the world through ravens or something. And he isn't necessarily, like, hunching around on Hodor's back so that Hodor can, like, fight people with a sword or something. It seems like his destiny is something bigger than what human physical bodies can be doing.
He's nowhere near any human settlement anyway. Like, what's he going to do? March south a bunch of ways to get back involved? Yeah, that doesn't. You're right. It doesn't. It just seems like he's far detached from humanity in terms of location, and good chance it stays that way.
Maybe his mind is transported into a dragon, or a wolf. It is interesting to think what will happen. Like, because let's say I'm right, and he is just going to have a sort of supernatural presence in the world that isn't like his physical body walking around on Hodor's back through the woods of the north to the wall, and zombies I just can't see how that plays out. But I still, once again, how would it play out if he is just like mentally traveling? Like, how do they
flashbacks?
Yeah.
I mean, they could do as one thing that we're sure is going to happen next season based on some casting. I won't be specific, but there's going to be more flashbacks, and based on who some of the characters are, it has to be flashbacks because there's characters that apparently are being cast that aren't in the current timeline. So it has to be a flashback, and based on who could be around who have witnessed these things, it has to be Bran seeing them. So that is at least one thing we're going to see. There's obviously more things that can come from this plot line and will come from this plot line, but that's one thing we can be pretty sure of, is that Bran will be a device to show us things that happened in the past that in the books happened through memories and people's internal monologues, things that don't translate very well to TV. So Bran's werewood networking kind of saves the showrunners bacon, so to speak, by giving them a way to deliver this without having it be like weird fever dreams and stuff like that. And that would have involved doing things way in advance of them happening. Like, as you know, someone who's read the first book, there's certain things in the first book, certain clues to one of the major mysteries of the series that really didn't get touched on in the show until this season. And I think they're going to go deeper into that next season. So without being spoilery, I think anyone who knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about. And if not, well, you didn't want to be spoiled there. So.
You're talking about who Hodor's mom is?
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Of course, yes. Hodor, because Hodor is the real prince that was promised, the real Azor Ahai, the real last hero, the real stallion who mounts the world, as well as the real god of Planetos.
You're joking, but right now George Martin's watching this. He's like, how does these read my mind?
Yep. Sorry, folks. Biggest spoiler of all time.
Other than the thing about Janice Slint.
Okay, let's take another question here. Here's a nice simple question from James Bushell. At this point in the series, who are your guys' favorite and least favorite characters on the show? This question might be a little easier for you than it is for me, because I have to think show only, and I got to divorce myself from my book opinions. But so you go ahead while I think about it.
You should know me better. This isn't easy for me. You guys, if you have no idea, the Excel files that I have trying to figure out my favorite movie, the processes I go through trying to narrow down favorites.
Sean has spent, if you don't know what Flickchart is a movie rating system where you tell it shows you 2 movies and you pick which one you like better. And you can keep sitting there while, and it continuously ranks your movies based on which ones you picked. And you can just keep, and Sean has spent hours on Flickchart.
Think about how.
Yeah. Some people are like, you know how many hours I've lost to playing, I don't know. I personally haven't played World of Warcraft, but I know like a lot of people have said, oh, I've lost like a whole year of my life to World of Warcraft. You may have lost a whole year of your life to Flickchart.
Maybe not a year, but
probably
a month
not a year.
for sure.
Maybe, a year is a little extreme.
Maybe 11 months.
So, well, maybe without, okay, so maybe what's more appropriate then is a top 3 or top 5 in no particular order. Because the actual favorite, I couldn't do that either. I could maybe say Tyrion.
I'll also say this. One thing this flick chart, another processes of me trying to like rank things and think about my favorites is it's got me to think a lot about how or why you pick a favorite. And a lot of times, especially more superficial or casual fans, and I don't mean that to sound too negative because I'm a superficial casual fan of a lot of things. A lot of times when you like first see a movie, you have emotional reactions.
Yes.
But when you start to study it, when you watch it again, when you think about it, you talk to other people, when you decide to put effort into it, for better or worse, you need a reason. Why did I analyze yourself? Why did I have that emotional reaction? Why did I have the emotional reaction for this character, not this one, or that event, or that movie, and not this one? Why was it so strong? Am I properly analyzing my own emotional reactions? Your emotional reactions change sometimes when you get deeper into it or think longer about it. So, point is, right now, it's harder for me to pick a favorite character because a lot of people, for a bunch of reasons, but a lot of people who would have picked my favorites are dead. But another thought is that a lot of times what your favorite is what's being presented to you more. Does that make sense? There are certain characters that are on screen every single episode. We get deep into them. We know their background and their motivations, their dreams and their emotions, and we relate to them because we're becoming so familiar with them. And so they become our favorites. But I try to distinguish between someone who's my favorite because they're being presented to me to be my favorite, like Dany, Tyrion, Jon, versus someone who's more in the background and I have to kind of decide to like them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Bronn or Brienne, and they've become featured a lot more recently too. Maybe Podrick even is a good example. Someone who's more in the background, and you kind of have to choose for them to be your favorite. They aren't being thrown out there as a central character in the first place.
I've noticed, because I've been in the fandom for so long, a lot of times people divide it into like, who's your favorite main character and who's your favorite secondary character? Of course, that sparks a whole new debate on who a secondary character is versus tertiary character versus primary character. There's definitely some gray areas there. Like Brienne, is Brienne a primary character or is she a secondary character?
I think she's secondary.
I think so too, but I can see the argument.
Right. And especially depending on what point you're talking about, because there's at one point where she's clearly tertiary at best, but maybe central, maybe primary now.
Yeah, like she doesn't even exist at all in season 1, so she's clearly not. But then in season 2, she's sort of secondary, but she starts to become more primary, and so it's kind of like, I never argue too much about that because I can see other people's points for the most part on those.
I imagine
topics.
In the books, it might be an easier delineation to say character with a perspective or not.
Yeah, that's a good.
But that might even become tough as new characters start to have perspectives that we had opinions of before, and our opinions change when you know what's in their mind.
And there's also major characters that are not POV, like Varys, and Littlefinger, because they know too much. You can't like go inside their head. That would just be too revealing, Or
to present them like that, but it still is going to keep you from have an effect on your ability to choose them as a main character. How featured they are in a book.
It also depends on which books, because, for example, well, I don't want to be spoilery, but there's certain books where certain characters are more present than others. Like just like Bran wasn't in the season at all. Some characters don't appear in certain books.
Ned's not in season 2 at all.
Good example. Okay, so I guess if I had to answer my favorite main character, I'll just go with the simple, easy answer and say Tyrion, because first of all, they carried over his humor really well. They've made him more central in the show than he is in the books, although he is certainly one of the most central in the books as well. And on top of that, Peter Dinklage is great. if I were to judge it season to season, it might be different because maybe Tyrion wouldn't be my top pick for this season. But for the show as a whole, I'd have to go with Tyrion. For secondary characters, I'm not sure. I kind of want to say Bronn, but I kind of also want to say no. I'll stick with Bronn. I won't get too complicated.
If I just had to pick one, I would say Bronn. Another point I want to make about picking favorite characters is something else we've also touched on before. Sometimes they're your favorite character because you like who they are. You relate to their personality or their plight. Maybe they're charismatic, or whatever. But that kind of leads to the other thing. There's some characters who maybe are charismatic, but they're not good people. That even characters who aren't good people, charismatic or not, they're good for the show. They create trouble. They create dilemmas that make it interesting. The show wouldn't be interesting if there were no bad guys. You know what I mean? Ned would just sit around talking about the old days. No one would have got killed. Everything would be fine.
There's this thing about the old days. They're the old days.
The good days. The old days are always the good old days.
Yeah.
But so sometimes you might like a favorite character, might choose a character's favorite because of drama that they stir up, But Bronn is definitely one. Leading up to this season, I think that there are three characters that I kind of waffle between. I liked all three of Sandor, who's dead now, Bronn, who I still will list as one of my favorites, but
somehow survived the season,
and Sansa. Although on some level, I don't necessarily want to say I like Sansa less, but storylines are revolving around her at least as much as ever, but she isn't really doing anything, if that makes sense, which is a little extra disappointing because at the beginning of the season, they were kind of setting her up. Littlefinger's like, "Oh, you've learned well, my young Padawan." You know what I mean? She was like asking poignant questions. She's being thrust into this dangerous situation, and she just has been a prisoner with 2 lines per episode, and we haven't seen her do and this has sort of been her character all along, but I feel like somehow in the past, when she was kind of under Cersei or Joffrey's thumb, she still was kind of fighting for herself in her own way.
And she had moments to shine, like she did during the Battle of Blackwater. She really took over when Cersei was kind of had given up, and she really that was kind of my first moment where I really thought Sansa or Sophie Turner turned it around as an actress too, because she's really good. But I personally wasn't that into her initially, but now I'm a huge fan. But I thought there would be moments like that with her arc at Winterfell, and I thought it would be awful. I thought Ramsay, it would be terrible, the things that happened to her, but I also thought she'd do some things more than just escape and more than just tease Ramsay about his
we got some bits. We got her stand up to Miranda, you know what I mean? We saw her pick up the little sharp device or whatever. We saw her kind of poke Ramsay at dinner about what if he has a son, and I thought this was building up to her making some, and maybe this is her move, maybe escaping out, or maybe I'm being too negative. I don't want to say that I don't even like her, but because I'm kind of recognizing that Bronn isn't standing out as much to me either, but maybe it's just because he's mixed up in all this stuff in Dorne, which generally speaking, I think he's the best part of it.
Well, he's really uncomplicated. He's positive. He's a good fighter. And he's charismatic, I think, and I think the thing that he's uncomplicated, I think, is really big because he doesn't get involved in politics, which means it's easy to not take him into consideration because so much of Game of Thrones is thinking about which house is in the right, which house deserves to be on the throne, which houses have behaved the best, and Bronn isn't part of any of these houses. He's not really involved in that conversation, so it's almost like he's less scrutinized because he's not involved in politics. And he's done, he's a killer. He would kill for money. So we know he's kind of, in that sense, he's kind of scummy. But
just like the Faceless Man.
But that doesn't feel so. Yeah, that doesn't feel so bad in Game of Thrones world. Like people killing each other, just like in a real world, that's awful. But like as far as Game of Thrones goes, that's kind of minor league stuff. Just killing people. It's like the bad stuff is like torture and real suffering. Like if you just get a quick death, you got off easy. This is Westeros.
What was it South Park or what what was the show? I think it was South Park. It kind of crossover Bart Simpson. Remember that? I think it was the one with the whales, the beluga whales or whatever. Do you remember this? It was the freedom of speech episode of South Park. I remember, it was a 2-part episode. And because Family Guy was going to show the image of Muhammad. Remember that?
Yeah.
And so they went to the Cartoon Network headquarters to try to stop it. And Bart Simpson's there. And Bart Simpson's like, one time I did this thing to my sister. And Karma's like, I fed this kid's parents to himself. Bart Simpson. Oh.
You're like, okay, you win.
I killed someone. I killed 100 people with a flood in their own house.
So yeah, it's a tough question as well to get to the bottom of. Okay, so let's take another question here. How about another question from high level from James Farley? We have, what are your thoughts on the pacing of this season? Something we sort of touched on earlier. I've heard people call the season slow, while others say the story seemed rushed. Could it be both? Which stories do you think could have benefited from more tension? Which could have been cut down? Well, I think we could say safely that since Dorne wasn't very good, I hate to keep harping on it. I hate being kind of repetitive on that. That could have been cut down because it wasn't good, but really that's not really fair to say. It seems like if it had been done right, the amount of attention paid to it is about right. It wasn't that there was too much attention paid to it. It was just that it wasn't done very well. What do you think? Do you think there were any plot lines that were too much time was spent on? I personally am very on the side of it feeling rushed.
I could see someone might call it slow because they might be thinking more about the amount of action that happens. I'm not sure if that's true. There might have been, this season might have had a little bit more setup and dialogue and conversation, if you will, less climactic moment. But I feel like by the end, boom, 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 climactic moment after another. I think the most rushed thing to me was Stannis' turnaround. I think we needed to see them suffering out in the cold and hunger a little bit longer to buy into him burning his own daughter there.
Yeah.
I feel like that, which might not make for good TV. It might have been like just a bunch of boring, terrible, dark, depressing scenes of people slowly starving and freezing to death. But I think I need that to swallow him burning his own daughter alive.
Yeah, we need more people starving and freezing to death for sure.
I love shows of people starving and freezing to death.
Yeah, really. They should have turned to cannibalism. I mean, come on, that's what we wanted to see. Cannibalism is good TV. No, but seriously, I think it was so many plot lines felt rushed, I don't see where they could have cut down from much other than just trading out things that didn't work for other things, which isn't really a fair comparison. So, but I almost, and I think I agree with you that that's the plot line that needed the most additional attention. And for me, it was the most surprising that it ended so quickly. I expected Stannis to still be a part of the TV show next season. So that was also a surprise for me. So I'm not sure how much of that is me feeling like it was rushed and how much of it was surprise and a little disappointing. Not just because I was disappointed in what happened, but my expectations for Stannis' arc were cut a little short. And so that it's hard to detach the two emotions from each other. I don't know which is more in play there for me, whether I'm more disappointed at what I wanted to happen with Stannis or because it was rushed, or if it's it's definitely a combination of both, but it's hard to weigh which matters to me more. They both matter quite a bit.
I feel like the show really easily could just have 12 episodes per season.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Just even if some of it was, I'm going to say this, I don't want to say it this way, but some of it could have been quote unquote filler. But what filler could be, if it's done well, is development of characters. And a lot of these characters get such great dialogue and has such great personalities. I would like to see more interaction between Jaime and Bronn. I would like, and maybe it's not worth it for that, but they certainly could add like 2 minutes per episode. That's like a whole nother scene. Like 2 more minutes on episodes 2, 3, 4 is a whole scene with Ilaria and Obara, with Doran and Tyene, and with Bronn, and you could get a whole nother scene with each of those sand snakes and cause us to care more about them all of a sudden. And I'm going to say it was rushed.
Okay, so relating to Stannis, here's a question from James Farley. What are your opinions on Davos this season? He didn't seem to do much this year besides give oft-ignored advice. Now that Stannis and Shireen are gone, do you think we'll see more from him, or is his purpose, as far as the show is concerned, over? Good question. Davos is kind of now a man without a king. He was super dedicated to Stannis, and now there's nothing. There's not even a Baratheon cause to follow, really, unless Gendry comes around. But how would Gendry be legitimized? Who's going to legitimize Gendry? I guess it's possible, but right now I don't see how that could happen. So I don't know. Certainly the suggestion that he might join the Watch is possible, but I also feel like the Watch is going to immediately be thrown into turmoil because I think the Wildlings are going to have something to say about Jon's stabbing, and it won't be something pleasant. I expect it might be quite violent. The Night's Watch may have shot itself in the foot. Davos might get caught up in that somehow. I don't suppose the Wildlings have a bone to pick with him, but they might. Stannis' army smash them. They might. Some people might have a blood debt with Davos if there enough people know who he is and what role he played. What do you think?
I wonder. I think it's going to come down to a few things. One, I'm still uncertain whether or not Stannis is alive or dead. But let's just assume he's dead. How long before Davos finds that out? Like at this moment, Davos is just doing what he was doing before. At this moment, he doesn't know that Stannis is dead. And so what I sort of expected was for him to try to rally the Wildlings to go help fight at Winterfell. That's what I sort of expect his current plan to be. But he doesn't even know that Jon is dead, and Jon's right there at Winterfell. At the moment the season ended, he doesn't even know Jon is dead, much less Stannis. And so there's a lot to think about where he'll go when he finds out Jon is dead. Does that affect his plan? It may, because if he wants to go to the Wildlings and get them to come help, and the Wildlings are like, what? We can't trust you. You just killed the only guy we could trust. So that doesn't mean they necessarily kill him right away. Stannis told Davos, don't come back empty-handed. Does he follow that instruction? If he can't get anyone from the Night's Watch to come, he can't get into the Wildlings to come, you just stay there at the Watch, like, oh, I'll stay here. And then he gets word that Stannis is dead. It's like, oh, I'm staying here anyway. Does he go back to Dragonstone? Or I'm not sure what commitment he has in his life, what he'll feel honor-bound to do, if he would be recognized by anyone. Is there anyone out there who would say, because in some cases I can imagine some house out there would be, whoa, you were hand to so-and-so, come join my house. I'll knight you, be my hand, be my master of whispers or my master of ships or whatever. He could be someone's master of ships, but they might not accept him. It was kind of unique for Stannis to put him in that position in the first place.
Look down on him because of his birth and his former profession as a smuggler. Yeah.
As I'm thinking about it, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets tied up with Brienne in some way.
That would be
see them crossing
Brienne,
paths.
so Davos would certainly be mad at Brienne. Brienne wasn't going to take kindly to Stannis supporters, I wouldn't think, but it's possible they could be reconciled somehow. I never considered that possibility.
They might not necessarily be reconciled. I remember I was kind of hoping for this time when Gregor and Arya would meet up with Brienne and Podrick, and it finally happened, and it was terribly tragic. It could still happen that way. Brienne could kill Davos also. That's at least a possibility.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Sort of a related question from Dornish Dan. The Iron Bank had huge losses with Stannis, potential losses with the Iron Throne. Plus, banks hate uncertainty, and the situation in King's Landing and the realm is nothing but uncertain. How will the Iron Bank flex its muscle to recoup its losses? Well, right now, you're right. It is hard for the Iron Bank to... I suspect they're kind of waiting right now. They need to wait to see who is going to emerge as... They've obviously, by backing Stannis, they were prepared to overthrow the Lannister/Baratheon coalition of Tommen and Cersei and Kevin and all them, especially with Tywin gone now. But yeah, I think they're going to have to wait for another candidate to emerge. Perhaps they'll end up backing Daenerys if she ever makes her way west. But it is too chaotic. I don't think they're going to back anyone until they have someone that they can be sure of, or at least reasonably sure will succeed. because they are gonna not want to just throw money into the wind. Stannis was a good bet for them because Davos convinced them and he was right, but it just didn't work out. Things that were kind of out of no one. I'm sure the Iron Bank didn't expect Stannis to burn his own daughter. They probably didn't expect the weather to go like that. They probably didn't expect a lot of things, but that's part of the gamble of war. Even Littlefinger was wrong about who's going to win in the north there. So I think that they will have to wait for someone to emerge as worthy of backing, and that's the way they can recoup their investment. Right now, the only candidate I can see in the show is Daenerys, but they're not going to back her anytime soon because of where she's at. You have any thoughts on that?
You made me think of something just now. Littlefinger, part of his idea, it doesn't even matter who wins, they're going to weaken each other fighting. Roose is probably stronger than ever, especially if
it didn't look like he lost much in that engagement.
Yeah, and even any losses he had might have come from again in the first place. Remember, we kind of speculated that the men who abandoned
some of them
went to Roose. Mm-hmm. Roose might have just even losses from that battle might not have been his troops or a very small percent. Roose might be stronger than before. His position is solidified. He's won this battle. There's less opposition.
Stannis, that's huge.
Status. It's a notch in his belt. There might be people who sway to him now. Anyone else who thought about attacking him might think twice now. He might actually literally have more troops than before if any of these mercenaries join up with him, even if for money. Roose doesn't seem like the kind of guy like, oh, I'm not going to hire troops with money. Roose like, yeah, give him money, whatever. Yeah. I think that it's something I hadn't really thought about before, but Roose is probably in a stronger position than ever before. It makes me wonder what's Littlefinger's next play now. If he was kind of banking on the North kind of falling apart and him swooping in to clean up the mess, that's not the scenario anymore.
It did not go his way at all, and it'll be interesting to see. He didn't appear at all the last few episodes, so we don't know what he's thinking or if he's going to be able to roll with the punches and still do what he was planning on doing. We know he's intent on Winterfell, and he still wants Sansa for himself, I would assume, but now she's got to worry about, Sansa might be like, dude, you left me with these people. Yes, I know I went ahead and accepted it, but I did not know it was up. And you're the one who's supposed to know these things.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that she's going to be – she's already lost her trust for most people, and this is just going to take that another step farther in terms of her inability to trust people. And I would think that's smart because she doesn't need to be trusting Littlefinger.
This is another thing. This is okay. Do you want? What question are we looking at here?
No question at the moment. So go ahead.
So this is a thought that I had. Part of what I wanted to think about for the season recap was dangling ends, like characters have been kind of left behind, things that haven't been addressed. Some of them not in multiple seasons. We don't know what's going on with the phrase. Maybe I just should give up, but I've been expecting some sort of comeuppance for Walder Frey. The Greyjoys, I feel like, are this player that's out there. The last we heard of them, they were a war. They were like one of the kings, you know what I mean? And everyone's like, generally speaking, they seem to be like, we'll deal with them later. And it wasn't like Greyjoy, wasn't like Balon wanted to take over the realm. He just wanted to not be subservient to the realm.
He wanted to be able to raid the rest of the realm.
And that's sort of what Rob wanted too. Rob did want a step beyond. He not only wanted independence, but he also wanted revenge against the king. But then he wanted to go back home and but Balon is still, where is he on Cersei's list of priorities? On the High Sparrows, Tommen's list of priorities, Littlefinger's list. Does anyone care? Is that just it? The Seven Kingdoms just done for? I feel like Balon is so far out of anyone's thoughts. You know what I mean? And it makes sense that maybe they're not being followed in the show, but I still can't help but wonder if it's going to come into play. If we're not going to see anything, is Theon ever going to try to go back home? Is his sister going to make a second attempt? So the Blackfish character, he disappeared, and Roose seemed worried about it. Walder Frey said, I'm not even worried about it. And Roose was like, all right, fine. If you're not worried, I'm not worried. But I feel like that was some sort of foreshadowing. They gave us that scene. They gave us that moment for a reason. Most things happen for a reason in a show. Is that going to come back, and how?
We're going to, one of these days in season 6, probably season 6, maybe not until season 7, we'll see previously on Game of Thrones, and they'll have that conversation. either show us that conversation or they'll show Blackfish like, I'm going to the bathroom.
So, of course, Bronn, we talked about Bronn. We kind of, Bran, Stark in the north, not Bran, kind of expect him to come back for sure. But another group that I started thinking about is the Karstarks, right?
Yeah.
Because Robb lops off the head of their house's head, and so their armies don't follow Robb anymore.
Yep.
So they go back home. Are they loyal to Roose? Would they be? Could they be? That's like a force. It's just like a force that's out there that isn't being accounted for. Maybe it doesn't need to be. Maybe he's just gone. But it's just another group of people that I wonder if it'll come back into play. If there's some repercussion is going to come from that.
Well, I won't spoil what happens in the books, but they are accounted for in the books. Let's say that. And yes, they would. What you could. Without saying too much, it makes sense that they would not be too happy with House Stark because of what Robb did. So you would think they would either side with Bolton or Stannis up to that point, and then after, assuming Stannis loses in the books also, then maybe they would change sides or something like that. But I won't say what they do in the books, but they definitely are accounted for, and it's like you're saying, they have their own agenda based on how everyone else feels about them and how they feel about what's happening around them.
A lot of the questions about what's going to happen and what people are going to do is really dependent upon the travel of information. Really depends on when they find out what's going on with Cersei, when they find out that Stannis is dead. Like lots of different characters, next actions depend a lot on what's going on with other people. Like what Littlefinger is doing in King's Landing at this moment with Cersei in jail. Whatever plan he starts to formulate based around that, how much does it change when he finds out that Stannis has been defeated? Add to that, if he finds out that Sansa's escaped, because you can imagine that's the type of thing they keep quiet. Maybe even, here's the thing. This is another thought.
All right.
They realize that Sansa's escaped. They don't want word of that getting out. They, I assume, do want word of Stannis being defeated getting out. I'm just thinking about how
they would want that.
It's been a factor in the past, like shoot down all the ravens. You know what I mean? Like there have been attempts by people to limit communication from a place that a key event has happened. I wonder how limited information will be coming out of Winterfell.
Well, Roose definitely wants everyone to know that he beat Stannis, like no question, because as he said, we can't hold the North by fear and terror alone. We have to that's when he brought up the marriage and all that. But he's like Tywin and like Stannis in that no one loves him. People follow him because he's powerful, because he's authoritative, and because he's not a guy you want to mess with. He's ruthless.
Formidable.
Yeah, he's formidable. So his reputation takes a big jump from knowing that he defeated someone else in that same category, someone else who was feared and respected and known to be a dangerous commander and successful. So this is huge for Roose's reputation. Any Northern lords who may have had thoughts of rebelling because of what he did to the Starks, second thoughts now. They're going to have second thoughts. Of course, if they wanted to help out Stannis, they missed their chance.
Probably, it seems like it was a second thought in the first place because they already would have done it.
Yeah,
it might have been made a second thought because Ramsay flayed a couple people for not paying their taxes. It might already, several reasons. It seems like it's already a second thought. Maybe not even a second thought now.
I will say that it is a bit more complex in the books. The political situation is a lot more. That's one of the things that made this plot feel rushed. Is that the other northern houses didn't get involved in this. This was just Bolton and Stannis in the season. There really wasn't much else from the other houses in the north. You're right to bring up Karstark, but in the books, there's more. There's a lot of other examples of characters or houses, and they get involved in different ways, various and sundry. So that's a good situation. The political situation in the north in the books is really interesting, although it also some people think it's a bit complicated and a bit confusing. So take with that what you will. All right, so let's see. Another question. Here's a good question from our friend Geek Furious. What if the Boltons end up as the last remaining and viable force to defend Westeros from the White Walker attack? How do you think the audience would feel about rooting for the family they perhaps now hate the most? Now, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, that's good. I like that question. That's really good.
I did suggest something similar in a past episode about maybe Ramsay will turn out to be actually a really good leader against the White Walkers because he is at least brave. perhaps too brave, maybe fearless, because he's kind of a sociopath.
Clever too. He's done several clever things.
He's not kind of a sociopath. He's full blown. Yeah, he has done clever things. You're right. The ambush thing, the guerrilla warfare thing was well done. Maybe too well done.
When he deceived Theon when he rescued him, but then just brought him right back.
Yeah. You hate to admit it, but he is smart. He's got rage problems, but he is not a dummy. So I think that would be amazing, and I think it's possible. I definitely don't think the Boltons are just going to be rolled over easily. I don't think they're just going to screw up and have everything collapse on them. I think they're going to be around a little while. I don't know. I have no idea their end game. I wouldn't even guess at that. I don't think they'll necessarily be very powerful by the end, but maybe they will be. Their castle is really strong. If the White Walkers come south, they get past the wall, who's going to have time to go get revenge on the Boltons if there's White Walkers in the north? So that could be who takes them down. They could put up a good fight and go down just like some of the other northern houses might.
Part of why I like that question is there's a couple things about that. That one is a lot of times this show gets you liking two different people or groups that are pitted against each other, and you find yourself rooting for a thing that you don't want to happen, and I appreciate that. And additionally, a thought that I've been having a lot lately is how do I want it to end? What if I got to write the ending? What if George is like, Sean, I've been watching a podcast and I really like the way you see things. I don't think I'm going to finish it. You go ahead. I'm not sure what I would do, because superficially, I feel like there's two ways it could go, right? One is the good guys win, very vaguely, keep in mind, even the good guys winning, I'm not sure what that means. Who would be the good guys and how they would win? Because I feel like Dany getting on the throne would be one way the good guys win. And I'm to the point now where maybe that's pretty much it. There's a point I thought, well, maybe Stannis, maybe Jon, maybe certain other characters could win by getting on the throne, but they were pitted against each other. But now I don't feel like there's another good guy vying for the throne. So maybe that's the way the good guys win, is Dany gets the throne of Westeros. Even if that happens, so it can't be complete. And maybe it's better that way. But I don't see Dany getting the throne and Winterfell and the Iron Islands falling in line, and Dorne. You know what I mean? I don't see her having a throne and the
some
seven
united
kingdoms.
Westeros.
Right. Yeah. She might get the throne, but the kingdom won't be united. And maybe that even is sort of a good compromise of an ending where it's happy but not perfectly happy. Another potential is the good guys don't win. It's more tragic. And I feel like there's enough tragedy. I can't believe that George is going to drag us through all these books and seasons of a show just to have Jon die, Tyrion die, Dany die, and just everyone die and Roose be king of the North, and that's the end. It seems like it's dark and tragic enough that could happen, but I don't see it getting to that extreme. I don't see it being this perfect, tidy, happy ending, or this awful, terrible tragedy where everyone's just dead. Just as I think about it out loud right now, that's what I maybe is the most likely, is that Dany wins the throne, but the kingdom's not united, which also leaves it open for more shows or books, offshoots, and stuff like that from a marketing standpoint, if you will. But point is that this is a way it could end. This could be part of the climax. It's true. This is a good idea that the White Walkers are coming, and the only one can do anything about it are these characters that we hate. And who do you hate more? These people that have done terrible, awful things, or these mindless zombies that are going to kill everyone? Who do you root for in this situation? And it would be an interesting dilemma. And I want to say the type of thing that Martin would do, where we have to root for bad guys,
Okay, let's see. Let's look for another good question. Lots of good questions coming in. Remember, folks, there's still time to submit questions and get them upvoted and have them answered live. We've got about 45 minutes left in the episode, so keep them coming. Lots of good ones still left to answer. So let's keep going here. From the Canadian dude. In episode 9 of season 3, Bran tells Osha to take Rickon to the Umbers. Do you believe they might be players next season? Do you also think it's possible that they're behind the North Remembers and might take the role of the Manderley plot similar to the books? Well, I won't comment on the Manderley plot similar to the book because that would be a bit spoilery. But as for them being players next season, I definitely think so. There is some hints that one of the rumored castings sounds a lot like an Umber, the way he's described. It could either be a recast of Greatjon or some other Umber that they're deciding to introduce. So, yeah, and the Umbers they've made some casual mentions of the Umbers here and there to kind of keep them in mind. You know, there's Ramsay's line, "What do I look like a fucking Umber to you?" You know, they've kind of mentioned them here and there just to, you know, whenever they do that, it's kind of, to me, it's a clue that they want to include that family a bit later. So I do think it's likely the Umbers are going to play a role. They're a great TV family to show because they're known for being huge people. It's like the line of Umbers is filled with oversized men with huge beards that are known for being, you know, fearless fighters. It's just kind of basically a thing with that house.
It makes for boring episodes.
And the reason they're like that is they are the farthest north of any house, closest to the wall. Meaning, so they actually have, over the course of their existence, they have been fighting off wildling raids forever. And of course, they live in a really harsh climate, so it kind of makes sense that they'd be tough and warlike and very northern in their attitudes. So I really hope that we see them next season, and I hope we see a lot of them next season.
I'll point out on my list of characters that have been kind of left out, like hanging, I didn't even think of Rickon. That's like a whole nother one. That's a whole nother thing that maybe they just disappear and go away, don't matter anymore.
Rickon and Osha, yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like they should come into play at some point. Like, one option is that they just got killed along the way somewhere, and we never hear about that, and that's just the end of it. But another option is they get to the Umbers, and the Umbers are like, a Stark is still alive. Let's just stay at home and not do anything about it. It seems like they're gonna let someone know.
That's
Send
a big
Raven,
deal.
you know,
Yeah, that's gonna be a big deal for them. They're like, holy crap. Yeah, because like if they've been, the Starks have such an amazing reputation in the North, and most of the northern houses are very bought into Stark should be in charge, and there should always be a Stark in Winterfell, and etc. So yeah, there's the North is full of traditionalists, and Stark's being in charge is a tradition. So yeah, you could really see them getting involved. I hope the show brings them in and makes them fun for us. Here's another question. Okay, I'm going to respond to a comment from Barger Films. It's basically, the comment is, in the book, they don't like dragons. I wouldn't think they would back her. That is in reference to the possibility of the Braavosi backing Daenerys. Now, that is a good observation. This almost certainly won't happen in the books. However, it could even. It's true that the Braavosi hate dragons. The Braavosi also hate slavery. And Dany is the biggest ender of slavery in the world right now, as far as we know. There could be somebody who's farther east who's breaking up slavery. Probably not. So Dany, we can assume Dany is the biggest anti-slavery person in the entire world. So it's really hard to decide how the Braavosi would want to react. On one hand, yeah, they hate the dragons. They might want to see these dragons dead. But Daenerys herself, as an ender of slavery, they would be all for that. So she might be kind of a divisive figure amongst the Braavosi. I don't know. That's a tough question.
Was she paying back?
There's also the fact that the show has not introduced the fact that the Braavosi hate dragons. So they may just skip that. Yeah. They may just not include that facet of history and just...
The show and the books might also diverge at some points, too.
Absolutely.
That could be a point where they diverge.
Definitely. I agree with that. Okay, so let's see. Another question. Since we were just talking about Braavos, here we go. From Jake the Fifth. What are your overall thoughts on the Faceless Men at this point? After the finale revealed that Jaqen wasn't even Jaqen, Arya ended up blind instead of dead, etc., etc. Was Jaqen's original mission in Westeros to find Arya?
That's the thing I had been asking. That's the thing that had occurred to me. I should say a friend of mine brought the question up when talking about Game of Thrones. Why was he there in the first place? And I was like, that's a good question. I should have thought of that myself. And I started thinking about the different reasons for it. And if there's any active reason for it, I don't feel like there are many clues to it. But it could be some more vague thing like destiny, you know, the will of the gods or something, which I wonder a lot about in the show in general. I feel like that maybe even is something that's underanalyzed or underthought about, is the relevance of the different religions and the wills of the gods of those religions. I can't help but think that in the past, I've heard you talk about how there seems to be magic seems to be seasonal. It seems to kind of rise and fall, maybe be connected to other things. Like maybe it's not a coincidence that the dragons are coming about at the same time that the zombies are coming about, and that's maybe connected to the presence of magic in the world. Maybe that's connected to the approaching winter, but maybe it's connected to the gods. Maybe in the heavens, the gods of the cold and the gods of the light are like at odds, and that's playing out among men. I don't know if they're tooling around with men to settle their disputes, or if the actions of men are affected or reflected by the actions and wills of the god. But on some level, it makes me wonder if one of the gods is good or right or bad or correct or more powerful or less powerful, more true or less true. And if so, which one? They certainly get featured. This season specifically has had a lot of featuring the House of Black and White, which is centered around this religion, and the Sparrow, the Seven in King's Landing has been. There's been more religious factor in this season than all of the seasons combined, right? And doing a season recap, that's something I should think about for a minute. Maybe now is the time for us to start. Maybe this is George's or whoever's clue. Hey, religion is a big deal. We're going to have a whole season about it, As we close in on the end, religion is more important than politicking. In fact, that was a thought I had about I got to make sure, because I have all these specific points that I want to make. And I like answering the question, but I want to make sure you get some of these points. That this season in general has shifted. I was thinking about just now, it occurred to me how much it shifted religion, but it reminded me also a lot of the intrigue shifted to the north.
That's true.
In the beginning.
And I'll jump in real quick to say that from casting news, it looks like that's going to stay there. There'll be a lot of northern intrigue still next season, even without Stannis.
Characters went from the north to the south. People went from the north to King's Landing, and all this intrigue started to play out. But slowly, characters from King's Landing started to leave and or die. And intrigue got spread around and then eventually concentrated in the north as Mance and the wildlings are brought to the wall. Stannis shows up at the wall. Jon becomes Lord Commander. Alistair's vying for position. If you include the wall and the north in general, like at Winterfell, Roose is there. Littlefinger shows up. Sansa gets married. There's all these sort of like maneuvering and politicking that before was all about King's Landing. Now it's all about the north. Not that there's no maneuvering or politicking in King's Landing, but there's way less. There's just no Littlefinger there, no Varys there. Cersei sent away, put Marjorie in jail and sent Mace away. And, there's just less intrigue to be had, less characters to do it, and way more up in the north. There's more at stake in the north. The question who's going to be king has been more in the north than in the south. It was, as far as people in King's Landing, it's settled. Tom is king, that's it. But in the north, no, it's not settled. Who's head of Winterfell? Is Stannis king? Who's supporting him? What's going to happen with the wildlings? Who are they going to bend the knee to? Those questions are all happening in the north now. So interesting shift.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take it south for a minute here. Let's respond to this question from. Well, actually, this is not from the south. This is all over. Let's go Viljar Eikeland here. Do you feel like the show has become a show that cheats to help the bad guy rather than cheats to help the good guy? I seriously believe that Superman wouldn't stand a chance against Show Ramsey.
I think they cheat time.
Yeah, they cheat time for sure. There's some,
and it's another thing too that it was a moment that I felt I could have done a better job. I think, and it sometimes is really simple. The scene where I'm kind of guessing what they're referring to is how Ramsay just like almost magically ruined Stannis' army. Just 20 guys snuck in, started fires, ran away. We never even see it, and they're just destitute. And I think they just show us a scene of Ramsay like head creeping over a ledge. You to the left, you to the right. Light up torches. It could have lasted like literally 30 seconds. 30 seconds of Ramsay approaching, giving out some directions. Someone lights a fire. Cut. Next scene is Melisandre. Yeah. Just let us see that Ramsay did it. You know what I mean? And I think that they're not. I think it's a thing. I don't think they're cheating insofar as how could Ramsay possibly have done that. I think it's very. They could have shown a guard asleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which also that would have been good too, because it takes no time, no money, just a shot. They have all these dudes in uniform anyway. Just get one shot of this guy asleep. Have Ramsay point at the guy. Have him show him light a fire. Then we see Ramsay, doing the thing. And Stannis is a little more justified in his treatment of the guards. When he's like, interview them, have them hanged. They're either with us or against us or whatever. Point is, I think that they. I can also see how maybe it was pretty quick how powerful the Faith Militant got. Cersei's like, hey, I'll let you guys have some power back. Okay, thanks. Now the Kingsguard can't even beat us. Like, whoa, that was really quick. That's another example of being rushed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think they're cheating time more so than the powers of the bad guys. I think that Jorah should have been killed, and assuming you think of Jorah as a good guy, which I do, he should have been killed in those fighting pits, but he wasn't. You know what I mean? So they're cheating for the good guys as much.
There's a lot of cheating in action scenes where people just kind of stop fighting to kind of look at something. They have these moments in frozen moments in time. That's kind of the reverse cheating. Instead of speeding up, they slow things down. That is, of course, a very, very common device in TV and movies. That is not remotely a thing that Game of Thrones is unique for. But I also think that there is some. I do agree with this in some points. The Boltons have suffered surprisingly few consequences for their actions in some ways, and also there's, to some extent, the Sons of the Harpy sort of cheat the way some of the really obvious ways they could be discovered, like find the guy, like not necessarily. Some of these things don't necessarily work. These aren't obvious. These aren't necessarily flaws in the way the Sons of the Harpy were written. But for example, find where these masks are being made, or find who the source of these masks, or how did they, like you said, with the pit scene, how did they not know to check people for weapons? It's a controlled environment. They get to take attendance, and you can check to see who's, pat people down like they do in events here. Things like that. It seems like the Sons of the Harpy were a little too omnipresent in their scenes, but I'm not sure if that counts as cheating. It just seems to me like Dany's team was a little bit too powerless, especially after Dario showed how skillful he was at finding that guy hiding behind the wall. He was like, you don't know how fear works, Grey Worm. That's why you're not good at this. So Dario knew what he was doing, but they didn't follow up on that. That didn't lead to more rooting out of Sons of the Harpy. That just was like, hey, look, I found this one guy.
It's another type of thing too. In my mind, I can kind of justify it away. I can say, well, they just need an inside guy. All they need to do is like have one member of the Harpy at each entrance where they're checking people, and not check. Oh, this guy's fine, let him through. And they even hinted at it. A lot of people were wondering if his door maybe had something to do with setting that up. But I shouldn't have to sit at home and figure out how it possibly could have happened. It should be clear in the show, and they could do it with like a line of dialogue. They just have one Harpy guy, just have two guys say, you go to the north gate, I'll go to the south gate. Make sure our men get through. Got it. And then walk away, and we see a mask in their hand. And like, all right, you know what I mean? I feel like there's sometimes I can understand why they don't do a certain thing, because it would take too much time up in the episode, or have it be a huge expense. I think about, having read book 1, I think about like Caitlyn sailing down to meet Ned, having to film this whole scene of her out on a boat and everything, like
some wooden, like a ship that would fit for the times, especially. We got to make a wooden galley.
You have to cast the captain. Yeah, it's just all kinds of stuff. Just don't do that. It's fine. You don't need that. You didn't need that, but you do need when you're suddenly going to have hordes of bad guys flood into this control with weapons that should be getting hunted down already. Like, it's, as a viewer, you're going to have to make sense of that. And sometimes you find a way to do it, but we shouldn't be having to find a way to do it, in my opinion,
Okay, next question. Let's see here. You mentioned the Kingsguard briefly, so let's take this Kingsguard question. How did they know there was an opening in the Kingsguard for Robert Strong that fast? Did Mace send a marathon raven straight from the Bravo's brothel right after Meryn's death to arrive in King's Landing, just as Cersei was finishing the last leg of her walk of shame? Well, yeah, no, they just screwed up. There were 5 Kingsguard with Tommen and Cersei in those early King's Landing scenes. and then there's Jaime and Meryn Trant. And this is after Meryn left. So that's 7 Kingsguard. And then all of a sudden, Robert Strong has joined the Kingsguard. So they just thought we wouldn't notice. This brings me to a point. Either they didn't think we would notice, or they didn't think we would care, or they didn't notice themselves. And this brings me to a point that I want to I'm going to pump all of us up right here. Game of Thrones fans, especially book readers, I'm not saying book readers are better than show writers. This is not what I mean by this comment at all. But we're a very attentive bunch. We really are detail-oriented people. The series attracts people like that, not only because there are so many details, but because digging for details is a very rewarding process. Because I've said this before in some of our book-centric episodes, but it bears repeating here. When you have something that is well-defined, that is well understood, when you have something that works well, in other words, if you keep digging and you keep finding more fun things, well, you're going to keep digging. If you look too closely at some books, some of my favorite fantasy books, if I look at them too closely, they fall apart. There's plot holes, inconsistencies. That's really common for lots of TV shows. Game of Thrones has its own plot holes and inconsistencies, but the ones that we notice are brought out so much more because the fandom is just so attentive and so in love with some of these specific details. So that's something that the showrunners here are faced with that is very unique. They have a very scrutinizing audience that most shows do not have, and most TV shows get compared to other TV shows, but Game of Thrones TV is compared to one of the most epic and well-loved fantasy series of all time. That's a totally different paradigm. So yeah, so this is a big tangent for a question about Robert Strong getting into the Kingsguard. But yeah, I think they just screwed up. I mean, you can write it off. You can say, oh, well, there were 5 unnamed Kingsguard. One of them died. One of them just got sick and died. That's what we have to do. We have to make up our own explanations. And if that made up explanation fits, I'm generally satisfied by it because it's you can pretend that's if you're immersing yourself in the world, you want things to fit. You want them to be consistent. And if that explanation fits, even if the showrunners didn't give it to us, well, I can accept it. But if nothing fits, that's when I have a problem. But I can accept a Kingsguard dying off screen, an unnamed Kingsguard dying off screen, even though there wasn't anything really to indicate what would have killed him. There wasn't any major conflict at King's Landing. But hell, he could have just gotten really sick. They don't understand, bacteria and viruses. So this dude could have just gotten, a little infection or something and died. So, yeah.
It hadn't occurred to me, but here's the thought on it. Jaime might be in for a surprise when he gets back.
No. Well, right? There's a couple of surprises. Yeah, he's definitely going to be surprised by who his new subordinate is. He's like, this guy is on my Kingsguard?
No, I'm supposing Jaime might not be in the Kingsguard.
Oh, like Cersei would try to kick him out?
Cersei was in jail. Qyburn might try to. Kevin
well,
might
they can't.
Try to.
Well, that's remember, like, I guess technically the precedent has been set by the dismissal of Barristan, but that was a precedent. Yeah. No one ever has been dismissed from the Kingsguard until Barristan. I don't think the Faith would do that because I think if the Faith wanted to take him out, they would execute him for some sort of crime. I don't think they would demand that he leave the Kingsguard because the Faith, I don't think, would go against that tradition, even though Cersei did. I don't think they would take that precedent and go, now we can do that. The floodgates are open. I think they would honor the tradition because the Kingsguard is a holy institution. It's 7 protectors of the king. So I think they would take a conservative view on that and be, well, these are the rules. He's a Kingsguard. They either execute him or leave him. I don't think there's a middle ground there. There's no gray area there. I don't think they would just dismiss him.
They would either execute him, dismiss him, or chop his hand off.
Chop his other hand off.
All right, I guess we have to dismiss him.
Send him to the wall. That is an alternative to being executed. Wouldn't that be interesting? Jaime Lannister on the wall. Okay, so let's see. More questions. Johan Petman, would Game of Thrones work better as an animated series? Well, I like that question. That's good. I think it might. You could still have some of these amazing voice actors doing the voice jobs, and you would remove a lot of the issues that real filming was faced with. You don't have to worry about things like ships. You just draw them instead of having CGI ships. You don't have to worry about actors aging up. You don't have to worry about the cast getting too old, which is a real problem with child actors because, like we said, with Bran, he's hit puberty, and now they already had to recast. Marcelo was recast. Gregor Clegane was recast twice. Great John just left, and so they just don't use him anymore. So yeah, it's really it's strange to think about the differences between how an animated show would work and how a live action show would work. I think it would work quite well that way.
You lose a lot too, though. To be fair,
yes, you do.
You don't get Lena Headey's facial expressions. You don't get, you lose the ability.
A lot of the actors have amazing facial expressions. Yeah. That's a big loss. I agree.
Also, it might be a little tougher to market because it's animated stuff is going to tend, whether they even mean it or not, it'll tend to be marketed towards kids.
Yeah.
And it should not be.
It would not be on HBO either. I don't think HBO. I mean, maybe HBO will change it up and decide to do an animated show.
But HBO's never done an animated series.
Think they have. I don't think Showtime has either. I just don't think it's their thing
yet.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like some studios just really have that on lockdown. It's like a skill that some studios have. They're really good at making animated things, and they just keep doing that. It's not something you just lightly get into. Certain studios have that expertise, and certain ones don't.
Do you mind if I take a second to make sure I'm hitting the different points, the different things I wanted to talk about?
Let's do it. Yeah.
It might actually take me a second to even look at what I have written down here, but
there's a question here that's just for me, so you can take a look at that while I'll answer this one question here. From Corky94. For Aziz, if the Faith or Cersei's trial proved Joff and Tommen were illegitimate and bastards and never true kings, what happens to the legitimization of Ramsay? Does he go back to Snow status? Well, typically when we'll use some real-world examples or real-world legalese to kind of handle this question, it's going to depend. It is no automatic. Tommen's decrees won't all be overturned automatically just because he's proven to be a bastard. It will be at the decision of whoever becomes king in Tommen's place. He will uphold this new king, whoever he is, or queen, whoever she is, would have the option of upholding some of these decisions or just ignoring them. If he or she doesn't care about the Boltons, they're not going to overturn that decision. It's just not going to matter to them. But if someone comes up to her and say, hey, look, the Boltons are your enemy, you have to deal with them. Here's a political thing you can do. You can overturn that legitimization. That'll throw a monkey wrench in their plans. So it just depends on whether whoever is going to see the Boltons as an enemy. So that is a distinct possibility, but it is by no means automatic. It is not a certainty. So let's see. What do you got, Sean?
All right. So one thing that I did is I went back. I wanted to see the beginnings of the different storylines in from this season. I wanted to see where we started off, where people started off, and think about where they've gone since then. I was hoping maybe to find some ironies or some clues, some foreshadowing. And so here are just a couple different thoughts and notes that I had. We start off at the very, very beginning of the season, we have the Cersei's flashback. But then we see the scene where Cersei's going to see Tywin's body. I guess, the funeral. And in that scene, they kind of feature a few different characters. Cersei, Marjorie, as she's walking by, Marjorie, she's just had the flashback, and she kind of eyes Marjorie. Marjorie kind of gives her the, I don't even know quite how to describe their facial expressions, but it was a good moment between them. And she passes the old High Sept, my queen, all these people from around the camp, they can wait, and she goes inside and sees Jaime. By the end of the season, all those characters, Cersei, the Sept, Marjorie, and even Jaime, are at low points. They're maybe dead, the Sept. They've lost their power. They're in jail. They've been embarrassed. They've been in prison, and so on and so on. Like I say, interesting, those characters that start off in these high positions of power in the opening scene at the end of the season have all fallen. Jaime's the least worst off of them, but all those opening characters that were presented to us all took a fall. Let's see.
It's like some sort of theme.
Yeah. And up north, there was a scene that Mance told Jon, because Stannis wanted him to go convince him to have them fight, right? And Mance says, "The freedom to make my own mistakes is all I ever wanted." He says that to Jon.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of later on when Dany is talking to Dario, and he's like, "Well, you're the least free woman." And I can't remember if he told it to her or if she told it to him, but she's the least free woman in Marine, that she can't choose. You're a queen, but you can't choose to do X, Y, Z. It's kind of interesting that Mance, that's all he ever wanted, and he can't do it. Mance also gets killed. I don't think Dany's going to be killed, but I will say a thought that started to stew in me as I was watching these kind of intro things. I was so sure that Jon was dead, but Melisandre's going to bring him back. So I don't know. Maybe Jon's just dead. I've started to consider he might just be dead. If I just had to choose right now, I still predict Melisandre's going to bring him back. But I just started thinking about, what does he do if he comes back? We were talking about it earlier. Is he just rejoin the Night's Watch? Is everyone just cool with that? Is he cool with everyone on Night's Watch? Does he go to Winterfell, just walk up all by himself? Hey, I'm going to take you over now. Like, do other people even know he's dead? Do they accept him coming back? Is it like, do the Wildlands like, oh, Jon, you're not? Did they ever know how quick does he come back? Is Melisandre, maybe she just uses his blood, maybe, and uses blood for what? To bring Stannis back? Assuming Stannis is even dead. I don't know. I started thinking about a lot of things. Let's see. Arya's list. The opening scene is really interesting. When we see her, we don't even see it till the second episode. She wasn't in the first episode. Second episode, she goes to the House of Black and White, and they don't let her in at first. And so she lays outside with her list. Meryn Trant, Cersei, Walder Frey, and Gregor Clegane. I think she calls him the Mountain.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, kind of going back to that. If you remember, she's just like, screw it. She just flings her coin into the water and just go, fine, I'll just do things. I'll do it myself. I don't need the House in Black and White. I wonder if she ever really abandoned that decision. Because remember, she's in the streets and the guys come after her, and the Jake and whoever character appears behind her. She follows him back, takes her in, reveals Jake's face, all this other stuff. But I can't help but wonder, rewatching that scene, knowing how things go, she doesn't really care about it. She just went. She didn't really care in the first place. She didn't know what else to do. She just wanted to get out of Westeros. I've got this coin. I might as well go to Bravo. So I'll check out this House of Black and White thing. She goes there and they don't want her. Fine. Throws her coin in the water. I'll do it on my own. She's still naming that list off. I'm not so sure where things are going with Arya. That's another thing that kind of got my gears thinking whether or not she's really going to sacrifice herself and become this House of Black and White. Maybe going blind will be enough to really do it. But I feel like she was never, and we keep seeing it over and over again, she doesn't throw the sword in the water. She buries it. Meryn Trant comes, screw the merchant. I'm killing Meryn Trant. I don't think she is still Arya.
She's definitely, like, I think we touched on this earlier in the season, she's kind of the hardest to figure as to how she's going to fit into the greater plot line. And eventually it's like, well, maybe she seems like she'll be killing people, but who? I don't know. There's so many possibilities, like revenge, like Walder, the people on her list. This seems like she'll probably get some of the people on her list. But what about, that can't be it. That can't be her whole arc. It's just killing Walder Frey and Cersei, and that's it. That's it. She's done. She's done after that. No, I don't think so. I think it's gonna be more to it. But yeah, I really don't. Even have no idea.
Walder Frey, just trying to imagine the timeline of that over two. They got 2 seasons.
Yeah.
I mean, they could do it in 2 episodes if they wanted to. It would be, episode 1. All right, this House of Black and White's not for me. I'm going back to Westeros. Episode 8, back in Westeros. I got to find Walder Frey. Episode 1 of season 7. She's at the twins or whatever, I can imagine it happening, but let's see. What else?
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a good question. Some people have touched on this sort of through the questions. This is kind of an overarching curiosity that a lot of people have that's been expressed in different ways. So I'll try to make it more concise by asking the question myself. What do you think? Some general predictions from next year as far as the overseas characters, as far as how things in King's Land are going to play out and how things in Dorne are going to play out. That's a tough question, but because there's a lot of different ways they can go, but we all kind of have a sense that 99% chance Dany comes over from Essos and comes into Westeros and stuff happens. What exactly is going to happen? I don't know. Same with Arya. She's going to come back over. What she's going to do, I don't know, but she's going to do something. We might at least have a sense of when that will happen? When is Arya going to come over, and when is Dany going to come over? You have any guesses on that? Given that let's assume that it's just 2 more seasons, because there's some talk that there'll be an 8th season, just like there's talk that there'll be an 8th book instead of 7 books. That talk has existed for like 10 years, by the way. So my personal prediction for Dany is end of next season, that she comes over to Westeros. Gives a full season of her in Westeros to do stuff and wrap it up. Maybe midway through the season, but I feel like it'll be more towards the end. And it could be the actual end. That would be like a real epic end to the season. Season 6, Dany sets sail. Her ships are all going, like all the dragons
flying in the background.
Yeah, that would be a really epic outro, and it would be a lot more uplifting than seeing Jon dead in the snow. Arya, I really don't know. I think it maybe around the same time, but Arya's I just have no idea. Dany's arc is a little simpler because you kind of figure, even if she doesn't take the throne, her dragon's got to get involved in the greater story. Yeah. So Arya, I still know. But Dany, I feel like I like my guess with Dany. Arya, I just don't know.
Part of why it's easy to predict Dany is because she's sort of had this mission from the beginning.
Right.
And to be clear, not the very beginning, but by the end of season 1. Leading into season 1, the closest thing she had a mission was not sew dresses. You know what I mean? She just didn't want to be a little princess, But by when Ned gets killed, from there forward, she has a mission. She has her list. Well, Dany didn't exactly have a mission either. Her mission was to not wake up the dragon and her brother. But by the end of season 1, before the end of season 1, really, well, in fact, this is good because this is going to lead me to another thought that I had. Cool. Another thing I wrote down. Because it wasn't the end of season 1. She definitely was trying to convince Call to get her back home. She wanted to go back home, whatever home meant. She didn't even know what it meant, what her mission meant,
Yeah.
But she had this idea that she wanted to go back home, was trying to convince Call Drago to do it. When he gets killed, though, she doesn't abandon that mission. And I should be clear, because this is something I just read in book 1. Okay, this wasn't in the show that I can remember. But she does have another mission. She vows vengeance on Drogo's riders that raped and killed that woman that she saved from being raped.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, but those riders are already dead in the show.
Did they get killed in the show?
The one who got his throat torn out by Drogo.
Yeah?
Yeah. That was him. That was the one. That was the guy that demanded that slave girl be returned to him. He's still alive in the books. So
yeah,
it's that conflict, that potential for conflict exists in the books, but he's dead in the show. So
that was another thing I started to think about, that Khalasar that started surrounding her. Like, what if that's one of those guys? And I couldn't quite remember in my mind how it went in the show and how it went in the book. But I was wondering if that's one of the guys she had sworn to get vengeance on. Because I remember thinking how it was just kind of abandoned in the show. Because when I read the book, it was like such this powerful moment that just seemed to go, again, I know the show and the book are different, and I don't remember exactly which name she named or what they did, or I couldn't distinguish in my mind how it went differently in the book and the show, but I just remember thinking, it's weird how that just went away. It hasn't just been mentioned one time to anyone or anything.
This is why this is why our book to show episodes are important for people who've read the books, because it's easy to get those details crosswired like that.
Yeah.
Where you think something that happened in the show also happened in the books, or something similar, very similar, but one totally important detail that just changes the whole picture. This is a good opportunity for me to point out that someone commented last week or maybe the week before that there's this thing I do, and Sean gets too close to talking about something that actually happens, and one of your predictions hits too close to the mark, and I have like a tell in my face. Well,
what is it? Tell me what it is.
Well, let's just say it was on display in the last few minutes. It was going. Some people were like, "Oh, that's the thing. That's Aziz's tell right there. Look at his face." But don't look too long.
All right.
Burned. Okay, some more good questions. Let's see, from Hand to the King, Cash Craig. We've sort of touched on this question, but this is a two-part question. We haven't at all touched on the second part of it. So how much do you think Bran learned in his season-long absence? Is it possible he has somehow influenced certain events this year? We sort of talked about the first part, but maybe not directly. So I'll let you answer that first part. How much do you think Bran learned in his season-long absence? Do you think he's gotten pretty powerful? Obviously, he's this weird kind of like supernatural character that seems like he's beyond. He's sort of like fourth wall almost at this point.
In earlier seasons, I kind of had this issue with Dany's storyline that I feel like she pretty much just got whatever she wanted. It kept me from listing her as one of my favorite characters because, especially past season 1, I felt like season 1 she was like growing, but pretty much I felt like in season 2 and 3, maybe even 4, I'd think about it a little bit more. But I remember when the thought occurred to me was when she was meeting with that guy. And I remember that it was a good episode too. I'm almost certain it was season 4 because there was this parallel between this guy that was coming to meet with Dany from the city they were going to conquer, which probably was Marine, if I remember right? And he was being carried, like he had these guys like carrying him.
I think this was Young Kai when they brought the huge chest of gold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was Young Kai.
And he was like paraded through this
streams
of guards, you know what I mean? And then brought to Dany, and there's dragons, and he just all around. He's like in peril just to meet with her. And it was, I'm pretty sure that was following a scene where Tywin went to meet with Joffrey, and Tywin just walks into the room, walks right up to Joffrey, towers over him. Just the difference in the power that Dany had versus the power that Joffrey had. The difference in the position that guy was in versus the position Tywin was in. Anyway, that was a well-shot, well-written scene. But one thing that I started to wonder when that was happening was, I wonder if Dany will conquer that city next episode or next season. And the fact that that was a thought that I had made me realize Dany has no real conflict. She just do whatever she wants. They're just pacing it out. Does that make sense? It's just a matter of whether or not she conquers this city next episode, and then another city the next episode, another city the next episode, another city, or if it takes a whole season to conquer the city. But there's no question she was going to conquer this season. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel the same way about Bran. I feel like it's a slightly negative thought that I have. They can just kind of do whatever they want with him. It's magic. And hopefully they'll do something cool or neat. It was part of why I like season 4 was I was really taken aback by that scene when the skeletons came out and the children of the Children of the Forest was like throwing those little fireballs. Like, whoa, this is crazy. This is fantastic. This is like kind of unique among stuff that's happened in the show. I was really kind of blown away by that. So I don't want to be too negative about it. It could be a cool, awesome thing, but it's just really difficult to predict. It's just something I feel like they could just do whatever they want, and I just kind of hope they do something good. I can kind of make it tense of predicting big picture, long-term stuff, but the details of, I don't know. I think just from talking about it here, what I kind of expect is a lot of him just in an incapacitated state, eyes glossing over, and then we see what he's seeing. And some of it will be flashbacks that will inform us of storyline stuff, maybe some foreshadowing. Maybe there'll be some of him going into other characters' minds or other animals and stuff like that.
That is certainly the second part of the question here. Is it possible he has somehow influenced certain events this year? Someone else asked a question along here that I can't find about him potentially influencing some of the ravens that we saw on screen. Like there was the raven eating the corpse of Lord Serwyn at Winterfell and some other things like that, which could be a nod to Bran being on the watch, looking out for. But I don't see any overt.
That would be really neat, by the way, if next season we re-saw some scenes from this season from the point of view of a crow,
that would be
or
cool.
whatever, or a wolf. You know,
if we have seen the wolf view before.
If we see Ghost's perspective of saving Gilly and realize that's Bran, something like that. I don't know, but that was another little thing I noted, by the way. Ghost was in the opening scene with Jon in the wall in the beginning when he was like training Ollie.
Not many other places. Okay, well, we were running towards the end here, about 10 to 12 minutes left. Let's take a few more questions from Vansishine. Hello there. It seems that the reason the Dornish storyline was so weak and not loved by many people is because it was made up by D&D and not taken from the original source material. Are you worried of how this would affect next season since Winds of Winter is not done yet? Yes, personally, I am worried about that. That may be less apparent to you, Sean, specifically how much of the source material has been used and how much hasn't. But yeah, I am worried about that.
D&D is the showrunners,
David and Dan,
producers or whatever. David and Dan, okay.
And or DB and David, whatever, they have initials. And so I am worried about that because they're going to have to invent more of their own material, and they have to invent it built on the top of their own material they've already invented rather than building on the top of existing source material because of the old butterfly effect, the butterflies becoming dragons effect from George's point of view. I don't suppose there's a lot to say about that other than, yes, I am worried about that possibility. It's hard to see how it will impact certain storylines, and it also really has to do a lot with how much George has told them about how certain plot lines will go and how whether he's told them a lot of details or just given them the high points. Yeah,
I can imagine, again, obviously I haven't read the books, so I don't really know, but I can imagine there are maybe like tentpole moments that have to happen, and they know that. And so they just make those moments happen. But sometimes those moments might not make sense if you don't know some of the details of how you got there, why you got there even. And that might even disrupt further tentpole moments if you don't get it right, So I suppose it's something to worry about. But I also hope and wonder that George still at least kind of keeps tabs on this. And if they, at the end, if they did something wrong, he can like give them some advice. Hey, you're going to have to find a way, do something with Bran so that this doesn't happen now. I don't know.
Okay, a couple more questions here. Quick one here. How about Dario from Brenton Van Mogadon? Who wins in a fight, Jorah or Dario? Well, I say Jorah if they're fighting over Dany. If they're just fighting for the hell of it, I say Dario. I think Jorah has just can summon this incredible extra motivation, can go to 110% when Dany is at issue. Just see how he was in the pits and how he fought there, and we saw how badass he was. And how badass he was when he was trying to impress his first wife, or his second wife, actually, Lyness, when he won that tournament where he was a huge underdog, and that was because he was fighting for a woman he loved. So I think that Jorah, when he's fighting for a woman he loves, is like a different man. But when he's just fighting, he's still very good. But it's a different thing. I think Dario would beat him otherwise. What do you think?
Overall, I like your analysis there, especially because from a literary standpoint, it seems like that's what would happen too. That's just the way they would write it. But at this point, though, Dario should win. Jorah got injured in those fights.
He did.
He didn't get killed, but he got wounded.
He did get
Dario's not wounded.
blows,
Dario's at the top of his game.
Yeah. Grayscale might slow down Jorah a little bit.
Yeah, and not to mention he has grayscale.
Maybe. I don't know how much it impacts him this early stage.
Maybe it makes you better.
You could just catch this blade. Ching! Right in my stone arm here.
Just like Jamie with the.
Yeah. So let's see here. Next question. Aziz, will you take my girlfriend to prom? Thanks. From Corey Daniel. No, can't do that. Sorry. That's there's a lot of reasons why no. The most important being I am not single. The second most important, or possibly the most important reason being, grown men shouldn't be around teenage girls. that's a no-no. Yeah. So thanks for the question, but I'll have to pass. How about this question from Jared Barger? What do you think will happen next season? Do you think the wall is coming down? I think the wall is coming down at some point. I don't think that the story can progress with the walkers being dangerous enough without them at least getting past it. And maybe that means it has to come down. But I think they at least have to get past it somehow, which I think means it comes down. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think that would be terrible. I think if the wall can come down, and I've made comments to this effect before, if the wall can come down, that means the White Walkers have a power so great, they shouldn't need the zombie army. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know quite how to compare it.
Well, what if they're really small? Like what if there's only like 20 of them? They kind of do need the army in that case, don't they?
Possibly, but it's the power to if they can slowly bring the wall, like the changing of seasons over like 4 months, it's slowly shrink, but they could suddenly make.
You don't have to assume that the others are why the wall came down.
Tons of volume of earth material just go away. Maybe their power diminishes as they get farther south, but it seems like if they can make it go down, they can make it go up. They can make anything go down.
Well, no, what I'm saying is maybe the others aren't why it comes down. Something else could cause it to come down. It doesn't have to be them that break it.
The Lord of Light does it.
Yeah, exactly.
Melisandre.
Yeah, that's a popular theory that Melisandre screws something up.
But what I think is more likely is that the whole wall doesn't come down. Is it a hole is open, a passageway is opened,
a breach,
a breach, right? Something that
might make more sense than the whole thing just coming down. That would be a bit much.
I mean, that would be like
insanely powerful magic, or
right?
Something.
And it would also be, again, my logistic mind thinking about it. That would be like a catastrophic event. that water would just flood Westeros. That amount of volume of water would just flood the plains. It would just ruin the environment. It would
be weird.
Yeah. They would, once again, they wouldn't need a zombie army. Everyone in the north would just be killed by a mudslides and flooding and, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I mean, that's another thing, though. Just because they don't need that power doesn't mean they don't have it, right? Like, they can have that power. George just gave it to them. It doesn't. I don't know that is terribly relevant to say that they don't need that. They do it. They can do it. Why not use that power? They can use all the abilities they have.
I just think it's almost like, Obama standing in front of a bunch of nuclear missiles and he pulls out a dagger. Like if you have the power to bring a wall down, and it doesn't really matter if you have a bunch of zombie army. That's how I feel.
Okay, next question. Will there be a book to show Q&A? I keep deleting my questions because they pertain to the book from Patreon supporter Warzip. Well, Warzip, we are going to have, we announced at the beginning of the episode, so you probably missed it. We're not going to do another book Q&A for the show this week, but we will be doing more book relevant Q&As in the future. That will become a regular thing, and we will occasionally talk about the show instead. It will usually be book-centric, but we'll occasionally head over to the show. Maybe there'll be new casting news, things like that, reasons for bringing it back up again in between, or during the off-season, rather. Another question from John Huffs. Do you think Jaime will still make good on his promise to Bronn and still make him a lord with a better wife? Or do you think the death of Myrcella changed all the plans? If not, is there a chance Bronn would betray Jaime and or Cersei because of it?
All right, I like this question because it's like two different notes I had written down.
Nice.
One is something I wanted to point out. Another thing Bronn said early on when Jaime went to get him, he was talking to his betrothed wife, right? Mm-hmm. And he told her, because she was complaining about her mean sister, he said, mean comes around. Bronn told her, mean comes around. And we've been seeing it this season. That we've been seeing some people don't deserve it, I suppose. But it did make me think, though, Jon's not totally innocent. Another thought that came to my mind when I said earlier that maybe Jon's just dead. Jon did sleep with Ygritte. He is a traitor. In a lot of ways, he's kind of the
not according to
show.
Sam's technicalities,
right? Sam kind of technicality, but Jon feels guilty about it. Jon didn't buy Sam's technicality.
You're right.
There are a lot of things that, as much as we want Jon to be a hero and protagonist, it's so tragic that he died. He did, and you can find these justifications, but he did kill another watchman to join the wildlings, and then slept with one of them.
It looks bad.
They are kind of damning things.
It looks bad. Yeah, I know. It's very interesting. Looking at Jon's as a character from the perspective of a Night's Watch loyalist can look bad. It can look real bad. It's really interesting. Yeah.
But I don't know if that's meanness necessarily. But it was interesting that the season was set up with Bronn telling someone meanness comes around, and we've seen a lot of it through the season. But it also connected to this same thought here is I was wondering if Jaime can deliver this promise still. Cause we talked a minute about the surprises that Jaime has in store for him when he gets back. He might not have the authority to give any land away. I don't know who is. I don't know if Jaime can, as a Kingsguard, can you just say, all right, here's some land for you? I feel like someone's got to agree to it, the king. Maybe Tommen will just go along with it, but Tommen might not even be able to make decisions. Kevin might kind of take charge. Kevin might just go ahead and do it. It might be like no big thing to him, but Kevin might not be even be in power by the time Jaime gets there. I think Jaime would want to honor the promise. I don't think Jaime's going to go, oh, Mr. Ola dies, so no, I'm going to do it for you, Bronn.
Yeah, he didn't put a condition on it. I rewatched that also. And he would just, because when we get back, you get this. He didn't say, depending on how well we do. Or
But by the way, and this is another thought. This is a thing that I thought about that we didn't address in the last episode. What if Myrcella's not dead? I was thinking about whether or not Jon's definitely dead. Stannis, I don't think so. I'm assuming Sansa and Rhaegar. It's possible that Myrcella's not dead. I'm assuming she is, but it's possible Tristan just has an antidote too. It's not crazy for the Prince of Dorne. Everyone knows about this poison.
That would just be so weird. That would be such a bizarre thing to do.
And it might be weird, but this is the other thing I thought. You know what else is really weird? Was the way Tyene leaned over Bronn and said that weird line and bit his ear.
Yeah.
And Bronn was kind of trailing behind, getting on the ship. I wonder if he stole it from her. She handed it off to him. I don't know if these are This might be harebrained.
That's too crackpot, I think. Personally.
I suppose so, but it's just
it just doesn't make any sense in terms of the
mind.
plot. Like, why would they do that? Why would they? What's the point of that cliffhanger? Like, Marcella isn't exactly a character people are invested in, and if she just recovers, that's like, okay, well, that was a waste of time. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not too big on that possibility personally.
I'm not too big on it, but just a thought that I had that I didn't get out in that last episode.
Cool. Okay, another question from Johan Petman. We have time for this one and one more.
I have 10 more things I wanted to talk about. So,
Who do you think is currently the most powerful person in Westeros? The Night's King doesn't count. I like that caveat there. Night's King doesn't count because it might be him. I don't know. I think it's the High Sparrow potentially.
Yeah.
It depends on what you mean by most powerful, but I think it might be the High Sparrow. I think he has the most sway over the most people, and he's the most powerful man in the capital right now. And the kingdom is very fractured, and I don't know. I think it's the High Sparrow.
You make good points, but he is the most powerful man in the capital of a realm that's fractured. The capital has no say over the Iron Islands right now, and they probably don't have very much say over the North or Dorne. You know what I mean? So
it's just really like it can't be Bolton. It can't be.
Right. I'm not saying it is Bolton.
It can't be Braylon Greyjoy. Like it's kind of like it has to be. It's like default. Yeah. I mean, maybe may not. Maybe should be.
Also, a lot of the power he has isn't very well organized. It's just the masses of people. He can't get the masses of people. Like if the High Sparrow decided, hey, we got to go conquer Dorne.
No, well,
I don't know if he could do that.
It's not just the masses of people though. He also has the armed people. Like it's not just specifically an it's a little more organized than a mob.
Yeah,
but it does resemble a mob.
But Danny,
it's a mob of potential zealots, which is very powerful.
Danny, wait, was the question in Westeros? In Westeros.
In West, yes. If Danny comes with her dragon, she's the most powerful. The person who controls, assuming she has reasonable control over her dragons.
Most powerful person in Westeros. I wonder if there's anything to be said for Littlefinger.
Yeah. Okay, and from our Hand of the King, Cash Craig, Melisandre said that she and Arya would meet again. Will that really happen? Well, that might answer our previous question. That might be who she targets. Maybe Melisandre will be killed by Arya. Ooh.
Maybe they'll team up. Maybe Melisandre will recruit Arya.
Whoa. That's pretty cool. I have no idea what they do together. So either they team up or one of them kills the other.
How many people on Arya's list would also be on Melisandre's list?
Well, Melisandre was on Arya's list in the show last season, but she was dropped from
How many on her current list? Would Melisandre care to kill Walder Frey? Would she care to kill Cersei? Maybe.
She might care to kill Cersei, but probably not. Melisandre is pretty much only concerned with the war for the Dawn. She's consistently just, I don't care about who sits the Iron Throne. She wants Stannis to have his powers consolidated, but she has been like, wildlings don't matter. You know, the Iron Throne doesn't matter. That's kind of tends to be her general attitude. So, okay, folks, we are out of time. So thanks for the questions. There's a lot of great questions. Some of you folks, if you can save those questions for some other time. We will have other opportunities for Q&A. You can always send them to us by email. We may handle them live on another show. So we're going to go out with this question. It's going to be our exit and our segue to a goodbye all at the same time. From Warzip, Sean, you don't have to read the books. Have you ever tried audiobooks? Any tedious/mundane task is made fun while listening to A Song of Ice and Fire. I have said that myself many times. I'm not sure if you're the audiobook type, but I do think it's a smart thing to do. It is a good way to get involved, a good way to make, like Warzip says, to do something fun while doing something not fun. It's a personal favorite of mine, and you can go ahead and try that out through WesterosHistory.com, historyofwesteros.com. On the right sidebar there is a link to try an audible.com free trial, 30 days for free with no commitment. You get at least one free book. You could start off with Game of Thrones or with The World of Ice and Fire, something fun like that. I don't know, does that appeal to you, Sean? Or you got to sit there and read it, don't you?
Somewhat. I have listened to several clips of the first book the first audio book already. Yeah. And I can imagine sitting down and listening to it throughout, but I don't want it to be my introduction to it. Does that make sense? I kind of want to I don't want to be tainted by the voice, the inflection, or I kind of want to pay attention. I don't want it to be in the background. I want to be absorbed into it. I think once I have read the books, I will use audiobooks to re-enhance the experience. But for me personally, I want to read it, if that makes sense.
Right on. Okay, so that is it for today, folks. Thanks, everybody, for the questions. Apologize to those who submitted questions that we couldn't get to. As usual, there were just so many good questions. We couldn't possibly get to them all. So thanks to everybody who joined us for our Unsullied reviews this season. We will certainly be back for season 6, and we may be back at some point during the off season if we get together some questions, if Sean makes some good progress reading. And of course, make sure to check out our history-centric episodes, which we'll be getting back to in full swing. It'd be good to have Ashea back regularly. I know a lot of you have been asking about that, and I'm excited to have her back more regularly. So look out for that soon. We'll be posting updates on when the next episodes will be out. And if you are a book reader, check us out on Thursday when we have our our live awards show episode where we pick our favorite and least favorite moments, action scenes, funniest moments, best scenery, and we'll discuss our answers all at the same time.
Best Unsullied commentator. Is that a category?
You got that on lockdown, buddy. Okay, folks. See you next time. Valar Morghulis, thanks for being a part of us. A part of us? Thanks for being who you are. Thanks for being awesome. Thanks for enjoying season 5 with us. Bye now.